Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Girl Trap, a Madeline Dawkins mystery. And this is written by Cynthia Hamilton. And this reading is hosted by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Madeline felt her way through the darkened room, the dank odor of the confined space making it hard to breathe. The rough cinder block wall was rubbing her fingertips raw, but she didn't want to let go for fear of floundering again, being forced to crawl until she hit something. If she stayed along the wall, sooner or later she would come across something, hopefully a door or hallway, a window, anything. From behind, she heard the creak of rusty hinges and the sharp scrape of heavy metal against concrete as a door opened, casting an arc of dim light almost as far as where she was standing. She backed farther into the shadows, her heart flailing against her chest. "Madeline, game's over. Time to stop playing hide-and-seek." Madeline felt herself grow rigid at the sound of Lionel Usherwood's voice. "She's in here, Stephen. I can smell her. Your ex-wife has certain scent about her whenever she's scared. Have you noticed?" Madeline heard Usherwood sniff the air theatrically before breaking into a raucous laugh. "Quit the comedy routine and go get her, Lionel. This whole mess would have never happened if you had disposed of her like I told you to." Hearing the cold, subhuman tone in her ex-husband's voice sent piercing currents of fear throughout her body. She continued to back away from the light, scaling along the wall with her left hand until she smacked into an adjoining wall. Terrified, she pushed away from the first wall and took small, cautious steps, her hands guiding her as she inched along. To where? She had no clue, and what was the point? They knew she was there. It was only a matter of time before they captured her again. The voice of a third man, Rick Yeoman, could be heard issuing commands. A second later, two Rottweilers scrambled into the room, snarling and growling, their nails skidding on the damp concrete floor as they fought for traction. Madeline bolted upright, her chest heaving, her body damp with sweat. She panted hard as her mind tried to bring her out of the dream and back to reality. The feel of cold, moist nose against her arm made her jump and cry out. "Oh, it's you, Charlie," she muttered, weak with relief as she patted her huge protector on the head. When she had recovered her wits, she turned on the lamp next to her bed. Her eyes roved cautiously around the room until she convinced herself she was safe in her home and that the bad guys in her night terrors were either dead or imprisoned. She forced herself to take deep breaths as the ordeal in the basement dissolved until at last she felt steady enough to get out of bed. Pretending to be more confident than she felt, she got to her feet, reassuring Charlie with several strokes on his large head that everything was all right. Still, she made a cautious inspection of all the rooms in her small house and checked her security equipment. Once she was satisfied that no one was trying to kill her again, she set about making Charlie's breakfast after she turned on the coffee maker. As she sipped her coffee, she wondered, not for the first time, how much worse it would get if her ex-husband succeeded in gaining early parole. The only way she'd managed to hang on to her sanity was to reject the prospect outright. Surely, with the multiple counts he pled guilty to, no parole board would release him after only serving 3 of his 20-year sentence, which in and of itself had been a gift in her opinion. The fact that she managed to survive his attempt on her life was the only thing that had saved him from a premeditated murder charge on top of everything else. She stroked Charlie's head as she tried to convince herself that soon the ordeal of having to face Stephen again and his possible release from prison would be behind her. Her thoughts had become an endless loop of arguments against turning him loose on the public, and her in particular. "He won't get out," Madeline said out loud, as if that could dissolve her fears. Instead, it made her realize just how much Stephen had managed to get back into her head. "It's going to be okay, right, Charlie?" she said as she got up and took her cup to the sink. It didn't help matters that she was about to separate from her new companion. Charlie had been a comforting presence, especially with the night terrors. She toyed with the idea of hanging on to him at least until the hearing was over, but she felt her former employee needed him more than she did. Whereas Madeline had thrown herself into her work as a means to put the ordeal behind her, Lauren was so traumatized she only left her apartment for doctor and physical therapy appointments. For the umpteenth time, Madeline thought about seeking help from a therapist, though the idea still seemed distasteful to her. Why would I want to burden anyone else with my horrors? She thought, staring out the window at the rose-tinted clouds heralding the sunrise. The world has enough nightmares to contend with, as it is. As she washed her coffee mug, she knew she would keep her own counsel. It was best that way. She would work through the mental scarring Lionel Usherwood and Stephen Ridley had inflicted on her. To do so would be her own brand of therapy. Chapter 2. Madeline rapped on the door and stood where Lauren could see her through the peephole. She saw the tiny circle of glass darken, then heard the sounds of the chain and deadbolts being released. She looked down at the surprise she had in store for her. As if reading his cue, Charlie raised himself off her foot and began to beat his whip-like tail against her leg. She couldn't help but smile, though there was no guarantee this arrangement was going to work out. After what that psycho Lionel Usherwood had done to Lauren, there was no telling if she'd ever get over the emotional scarring. "Hi, Maddie," Lauren said, somewhat guardedly before her eyes landed on Charlie. Oh, wow, you got a dog." Without any hesitation, she and Charlie went at each other like long-lost friends. "Look at you. You are so cute and so huge," she added, looking up at Madeline as if to ask what had prompted her to get such a large dog. Madeline and Lauren laughed in unison as Charlie's tail thrashed against Madeline's thigh. "Mind if we come in?" Madeline suggested. "Not at all. Come on in," Lauren replied as she pulled the door back and stood out of the way. Madeline gave Charlie a signal and he walked over the threshold, sticking by her side. "Can I get you something to drink?" Lauren offered. "How about you, Charlie? Would you like some water?" Charlie's enthusiastic response was to swing his tail double time, whipping anything within a half-circle radius. Madeline unhooked his leash and stepped out of range, absently rubbing her hand up and down her right leg to quell the stinging. Sensing his freedom, Charlie set off in slow saunter after Lauren, idly sniffing as he catalogued her possessions. Whether this plan of Madeline's would work out or not, all the effort was worth seeing Lauren smiling and laughing again. It had been a long 4 months, a time Madeline was anxious to put behind both of them. "What kind of dog is he?" Lauren asked as she set a bowl of water down and wisely stepped back. "He's Rhodesian Ridgeback and Boxer mix." "How much does he weigh?" 85 pounds, all of it muscle. As if he knew they were talking about him, Charlie abandoned his bowl mid-slurp to show his appreciation for being included in the conversation. Lauren laughed and crouched down to his level while she playfully took the sides of his face in her hands. "What made you decide to get a dog?" she asked, dividing her attention between her former boss and Charlie. This was the moment Madeline had practiced in her head half a dozen times. She could see Lauren's response going either way. "Well, actually, Charlie is a gift for you." Lauren's features froze as this bulletin registered. Having known her for over 6 years, Madeline could read the thoughts and arguments as they registered on her face. "I can't have a dog," she said, abandoning Charlie to face Madeline at eye level. "My landlord doesn't allow pets." Her voice was tense to the point of being dramatic. Madeline searched Lauren's face for her real concerns, scrutinizing her closely as she eliminated her argument. "Actually, he's made an exception this time." Madeline watched as the word "why" formed on Lauren's lips before the answer became obvious. "I took care of the increase in the security deposit," she added, hoping that would further ease Lauren's concerns. Lauren lowered her eyes and wrapped her arms around herself, retreating to a place of defense even though the threat to her safety no longer existed. Being so attuned to human emotions, Charlie looked back and forth between the women as he tried to gauge what was needed of him. Torn, he sat down on his butt, then let his front legs slowly slide out in front of him until he was resting more or less like a sphinx. After giving a doleful look in either direction, he lowered his head to his paws and let his eyes oscillate back and forth, waiting for a signal. "Charlie's a service dog," Madeline explained, omitting the word psychiatric from the title. "He's been trained and certified. In addition to being an imposing presence, he will stand between you and anyone who approaches who's unfamiliar to him. He's not aggressive like an attack dog, but his movements make it clear his job is to protect you. His size alone is enough to get that point across. Lauren squatted down and kept her eyes averted as she tentatively stroked Charlie's head. Madeline remained quiet while they had a chance to gauge each other's intentions. After a minute of Lauren's gentle touch, Charlie closed his eyes and let his head settle in her direction, implying his trust in her. Madeline watched as Lauren swallowed hard, fighting down conflicting emotions. It was clear she trusted Charlie. The hard part was believing that he could make her fear go away. "I haven't had a dog since I was a little girl," Lauren said. "They haven't changed much," Madeline replied, getting a reluctant smile out of Lauren. "He probably eats like a horse. A small horse." Lauren laughed in spite of herself. "I think we can keep you in dog food. And I'll have to walk him, I suppose." "It might be the other way around," Madeline said, keeping her tone playful in hopes of giving Lauren no more arguments against accepting her gift. Despite Madeline's efforts to lighten the mood, Lauren began massaging the shoulder that received Lionel Usherwood's bullet, as if to relay her lingering insecurity. "I spoke to Kurt. He said your physical therapy is completed and your range of motion is pretty much back to normal. I took Charlie along so he could interview him, make sure you wouldn't be taking on more than you can physically handle." Lauren stood and let out a deep sigh, one that seemed to encompass all the hurt and fears that had shadowed her the past 4 months. "It's going to be a big change in your lifestyle, but I honestly think he's going to be good for you. I think you'll be good for each other." Lauren's lips worked to conceal her feelings as she tried to muster her courage. Already attuned to her, Charlie lifted his head and got to his feet, offering himself as emotional support. "If it doesn't work out for any reason, we can find another placement for him," Madeline assured her while omitting the fact that she'd love to have him back. She'd grown used to the feeling of security she'd had in the 7 days Charlie had been with her. But Lauren's emotional well-being weighed heavily on her, more so than her own. Besides, she had the latest in electronic wizardry to put her mind at ease, though it seldom did. Madeline watched as Lauren's attention was drawn back to Charlie, which she took as a sign that the two were already bonding. "He sure is sweet, aren't you, Charlie?" Lauren cooed. Charlie licked her hand in agreement. Madeline suppressed a smile and decided to leave on that hopeful note. "I'll let you two get acquainted. Being cared for by you will signal to him that he's your protector now." Madeline savored the affectionate moment between Lauren and Charlie before heading toward the front door. She picked up her tote and removed a 3-month supply of doggy waste bags, which she placed on the coffee table next to Charlie's leash. "Almost forgot. Do you have a list for me?" "Oh, yeah," Lauren replied, hustling to the kitchen, Charlie ambling behind her. She laughed as she bumped into him while coming back around the counter. "Here it is," she said, her reluctance at handing it over obvious. "I'm sorry to put you out like this. There's nothing on there I need right away. Just next time you go." Madeline dismissed her concerns with a wave of her hand. "It's no trouble. I'm happy to do it." She glanced at the grocery list and tucked it in her pocket, then turned to leave. She didn't get far before she heard the clack, clack, clack of toenails behind her. "Oh no," Madeline thought as she turned to see Charlie following her to the door. "It's okay, Charlie. I'm leaving, but you're going to stay here with Lauren," she said, taking his head in her hands in hopes of making her intentions understood. Charlie's tail whipped the air tentatively, a sign he wanted to be compliant if he could figure out what was expected of him. "Call him," Madeline instructed as she reached for the doorknob. "Come here, Charlie boy," Lauren said hesitantly. Charlie hesitated, his allegiance clearly torn. "Call him again," Madeline suggested, keeping her tone light and conversational. "Come here, Charlie. Come on, boy," Lauren sang out, not fully confident, but getting there. After a short canine deliberation, Charlie abandoned Madeline in favor of his new mistress. Madeline wasted no time. She stepped outside and pulled the door closed, pausing a moment to listen. When she heard no scratching on the inside of the door, she set off for her car. She had accomplished her mission, and for that, she was grateful. Still, she couldn't deny that she felt as though she was leaving a chunk of her peace of mind behind. As she walked around the corner to her car, she paused to look at Alameda Park. The gleeful cries of young children filled the heavy sun-infused air, accompanied by the sound of various car doors closing as more people descended upon the grassy grounds. Picnics and birthday parties dotted the square block, some in the shade, some forced into the dappled sunlight. For one long second, Madeline had the strong urge to find herself a patch of unclaimed grass under a tree and let the sounds of summer transport her back to memories of innocent contentment. Perversely, she denied herself the simple pleasure of relaxing on a Sunday afternoon just because she could. Instead, she unlocked her car door remotely and made this decision to hide from the gorgeous day, heading for her office in the sense of security it afforded her. By the time she belted herself in, her mind was already occupied by all the tasks that used to be handled by Lauren. She added another mental note to choose a replacement before the end of the week. If she really concentrated, she might be able to choose one that was up to the task, if not up to her exacting standards.